Hey there everyone, it's Jaycee. Welcome back to another perfect pairing with me. What if I told you creating a show-stopping full floral scene on your handmade cards is actually incredibly simple? Today I'm proving that card making can be an absolute breeze, especially when it comes to gorgeous floral designs with layers of simplicity. Before we get into today's project, make sure you subscribe to the Altenew channel for more card making and paper crafting tutorials. My Perfect Pairings with Jaycee series explores crafting techniques that effortlessly blend sure-to-love new releases and well-loved Altenew favorites. If you love these kinds of crafty tutorials, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of my videos airing on the 2nd and 4th Sunday. I'm going to start with the most foreground element to this card. Usually I work from back to front, but I'm honestly not quite sure how I want to arrange this foreground element onto my background. So this is Altenew's Prairie Roses Craft a Flower, of course with its innovative keyhole alignment system. And I'm going to keep these colors pretty true to the reference images I was looking at online. The reference rose I was looking at online was Rosia arcansana, which is a North American variety of wild rose. Anyway, yeah, and it looks just like this on the die set packaging with its blush pink, yellow centers. The quartering is quite flat, it's nothing like cabbage-like. And I already die cut the majority of the pieces ahead of time, except for this cluster of leaves. I might change my mind later, but otherwise I cut everything in this die set so far. Onto my Altenew sticky mat grid, this is the 9x12 size. I'm going to arrange my petal elements onto my sticky mat grid. I've cut the 2 circle petals, the arrows, and this T image, I guess, alignment system, and also 2 of the flower bud images. And I cut all of these layers from Blush, Crafty Necessities cardstock. In the reference images I was looking at for the coloration for these petals, I found that Bubblegum Dreams was my closest match. So that's baby pink, fuchsia, magenta, and jazzberry. And I'm going to start from lightest value to darkest value inks and just start blending this color onto the petals, creating a smooth gradient from the center moving outward. And if you've watched my perfect pairing playlist on YouTube, then you'll know this is not unusual. This is not an unusual workflow for coloring these images. I'm using the mini ink blending tools to do this, and I can quickly work up smooth gradients starting from the center of the flowers outward. I am coloring these a fairly high amount of detail. This is my most foreground element, so I do want these to look the most realistic in the front of my scene. So once I've got a layer of baby pink, I'm going to move down my values of ink to fuchsia and a different mini ink blending tool. And I'm not taking this color quite as far as I did for baby pink, so I'm focusing this color about halfway up the petal. I'm also going to apply a gradient of fuchsia on my flower bud images. And I applied that 2/3 of the way up, leaving just a peep of blush cardstock right at the very tip of the bud. Then moving down to magenta, I'm applying just a suggestion of this color right at the center of maybe just 2 of these petal images. I want a variety of depths throughout my bouquet on my card. So I'm applying magenta just on the 2 circle alignment and also the T, making sure that the layer is pretty dark. Then finally I'll move down to jazzberry, and I'll just use jazzberry on the T alignment, really deepening that center, and then also on the flower bud. I'm filming this video about the time that my roses have started to get their first flush in my zone and in my season, so I'm feeling really inspired to get these roses just right and the coloration just right based on what I'm seeing in my own garden. So I'll leave that alone for these 4 sets of inks, and also the layering images, so I'll set these all aside and let them dry back before I start assembling these images. Then I'll start working on my foliage elements. Again, I cut not all of the images in the die set, and I used Sweet Leaf Crafty Necessities cardstock to die cut all of these layers. And Sweet Leaf comes from the Green Meadows family of inks. So just to make things easy, I'm going to pull out those inks. So I started with Sweet Leaf. There's an ink that's lighter than this, which is Minty Mint. But I'm not going to use that since I started with this value of ink. So I'll start with Sweet Leaf and work my way down to just green and then Hunter Green. And in my reference image, I just felt like the leaves of Rosia arkansana looked a little bit more blue-green to me, which is why I picked this family of inks to color the leaves. And even though Sweet Leaf is the same tone as the cardstock, I find that this helps me get really smooth gradients when I'm working on colored cardstock, is to apply the same tonal ink and then work my way down to my darker values, if that makes sense. So Sweet Leaf, same tone as the cardstock. So then I've essentially primed the cardstock for the following inks, which is just green and another mini ink blending tool. And as this dries, I feel like it just levels out much better. And I want a quite drastic gradient on these leaves. So I'm really trying to make sure that I'm showing a lot of depth and darkness so that my flowers really pop on top. Then finally I'll move down to Hunter Green, and I'm applying this ink just to a few clusters of leaves so that everything is in the same value. And hopefully I'll get a lot of variation throughout my bouquet. And I actually want these stems to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to move away from Green Meadows Fresh Dye ink. And I'm actually going to bring back Magenta Fresh Dye ink to lightly color the stems and get some texture on these stems. So instead of ink blending, I'm sort of like painting and swiping this color to give that bark-like appearance to the stem. Same with the bud stems here. I'll also do that on the base of some of these leaves, just to incorporate a little bit of interesting texture on this most foreground element. And you know what I just realized? I have 2 of the buds, so I need to cut 1 more of these. So I think that finishes my foliage, so I'll set these aside as well. Now I'm going to work on the flower centers. I'm just grabbing the final detail layer to the center. And I also cut these from Sweet Leaf. And then I also have the anther layers for the rose centers. And I will be applying just a little bit of ink to these layers. Onto the detail layer of the flower center, I'll bring back out just green. And just quickly swipe this color onto that layer. And I cut the flower centers from Vanilla Cream Crafty Necessities cardstock. So I think Citronella will look nice. And I'm barely applying a shadow of this to the centers. I don't want to lose the nice highlight on the anthers. Then I'm going to set aside all of these layers as well. And you know what, as I craft, sometimes things just change and I change my mind. I'm going to add a little bit more color to the petals, but in the reverse fashion. So I applied color to the center of the flowers, and I want to deepen the tips of the petals. It's just what I'm seeing on my reference images. So I'm taking just the petal images, not the buds. And I'm going to bring back Fuchsia Fresh Dye ink from the Bubblegum Dreams that we've been using. And I want to apply this color just to the tip of the petal. And I'm barely applying a suggestion of this color. To the petal tip, I really still want that blush cardstock to peep out from underneath. And I will do that for all of the petal layers. I'm starting off of the petal and blending that color in towards the center. Being careful not to apply too much ink. I do want to keep the impression of this image fairly light still. And on my darker flowers, which is this one and this grouping of images, I'll even apply a lighter layer of magenta just to the very tip of the petals, just so it looks like these roses are in different maturity stages and bloom stages in their cycle. Now I can let these images dry back before I glue them. I grouped all of the layers together just so that it's easy for me to grab and stack them, but after applying a layer of glue to just the centers of the flowers, I can quickly grab and align the petal images to their respective layers. And I am working in numerical order as shown on the die set packaging. And when you organize your die cuts in numerical order and also in the same orientation, it's so easy to quickly just grab and align your layers so that you can assemble them quickly and then there's no more guesswork. I'll also align and glue my two bud images down here on the bottom right. And now I'll let the glue dry before I start manipulating these petals too much. So after letting the glue dry back, I wanted to create a really rough arrangement using the A2 alignment guide, the portrait A2 alignment guide on my Altenew cutting mat. But while these prairie roses look great by themselves, just right here on the A2 size card front, I just feel like it needs a little bit more something on the background. Again, my roses have just bloomed. I've experienced my first flush of roses this season, so I just feel like I want to add a little bit more to the scene based on what I'm seeing in my own garden. So I've added a lot of detail to the most foreground element, which is obviously the Crafty Flower Prairie roses. But then I feel like for the background, I want something a little bit more abstract and less detailed, right? And I feel like that's going to help really create some interesting depth to this scene. So I'm grabbing stencil art, playful watercolor flowers. I feel like the image style found on this stencil set is pretty close to the images that are found in Crafty Flower Prairie Roses. So now that I have a rough idea of this arrangement, I kind of want to see how these images will fit spatially onto my background. And what I want to do with stencil layers number 2 and number 4, since these are the least detailed layers, the base layers to this grouping of images, what I'm doing is aligning the etching and the openings to stencil art, playful watercolor roses, flowers, and get an idea of how big this arrangement is going to be and what it looks like on my card front, right? I want the buds to be in generally the same area as my prairie rose buds. And I feel like this will help me get a better idea of how I want all of these elements to interact and play on my card front. And it'll just give a really full scene to my card. So I'm pretty close here. I'm just going to overlay this on top of everything just to see where everything is fitting. And I kind of want these rosebuds to really point towards the top left corner of my card panel. And as I'm looking through this image, I'm seeing that the petal layers of playful watercolor flowers, I don't think I need to color them in. So I know it's looking like a lot of stencil layers on my work surface right now, but in my view, and hopefully when I edit this video, you'll be able to see all of the layers come through. But as far as I can tell, I don't need to color the stencil layer number 1. That's the layers that have the petal images to them, because you won't even see them in the very end. I'm bringing back my 9x12 sticky matte grid. and I'm aligning a panel of A2 sized white cardstock. And again, I have stencil layer number 4 and number 2 and control the placement of this entire image onto my background. I have stencil layer number 4 on top of layer number 2. And now as I work through the series of layers, I should be able to get better control of where these images get placed on my background. And when it comes to adding depth to a scene, usually your background elements are going to be darker and less detailed, which is what I love about stencil art playful watercolor flowers, is the illustration on this set is much less detailed. So I'm taking a large ink blending tool and I'm applying Shadow Creek fresh dye ink to the base layer of my leaf images. And again, I'm starting pretty dark intentionally because these are my most background elements on this card. Then once I have this layer colored, I can reveal the image. Then I'll move down to layer number 3. So then I'll move down to layer number 3. And this time I'll use Mountain Pine to color this layer and get intense saturation of this detail layer for these leaves. Then I'll add stencil layer number 4. Again, this is the layer that has the bud images, so I definitely want these. And I think I'll actually move up to Grass Field fresh dye ink, and I'm applying a very saturated layer of this ink. Then I can move down to layer number 5, and I want to go all the way to my deepest value on this layer just to see what happens. So I actually do need a little bit of stencil layer number 1. So I'm just going to quickly align that and to fill in those layers. See, it's not a lot. You know what I just realized? I grabbed the wrong ink. So I was supposed to be using Sweet Leaf, Just Green, and Hunter Green, the same inks I was using to color the foliage, but that's alright. We'll see what happens. And right now I'm really liking how lush and full this arrangement is looking on my card front. It really feels like I'm looking at one of my rose bushes outside with all of its compact greenery and then just the roses right at the top of the bush and in full bloom. So I'm going to add just one last detail before gluing down all of those elements to my card front. This time I'll actually grab the right ink, which is, let's do Minty Mint. And I want to apply just the slightest gradient starting from the bottom of my panel, working my way about halfway up. I feel like this is going to really finish the scene and just give a really nice impression of this bouquet. So now I'm going to add this to a folded note card base, just like this. And now I'll start arranging all of my foreground elements. I'm going to start by gluing down my main branch. Then I'm foam mounting my prairie roses and arranging them along the branch. And I made sure to curl these petal images so that they stick up on my card front. And I use the 1/16 and 1/8 thickness, especially in this top corner here, so that one of the roses is more in front of the other. Then once I have my main floral elements arranged on top, I can start tucking in and filling my bouquet with the foliage layers. And after tucking and gluing in all of my elements to this card front, and also foam mounting certain pieces so that they are more in front of others, I feel like this finishes the arrangement. It's really full, it's got a little bit of direction to it, and now I feel like it just needs a sentiment. But before I do that, of course, I've got to add some splatter. I feel like the splatter helps unite the foreground and background elements. So I'm going to add my favorite pure white ink splatter to this entire arrangement. I'm using pure white ink spray and an Altenew fine-tipped water brush to add an array of splatter to this entire arrangement. I want to add a very simple sentiment banner to this arrangement. I'm finding a lot of choices in Cornered Blooms for a 4x6 stamp set. I think this Sweet Wishes sentiment right here will do the best on my arrangement, so I'm going to stamp this. I stamped the sentiment in Hunter Green fresh dye ink. I grabbed the right fresh dye ink this time. I'm going to embellish this card with crystal clear enamel dots. And that finishes this floral scene featuring a really simple trick to get some interesting depth on your scenes. So we're adding a lot of detail to the more foreground element, less detail and darker elements in the background. And even though there's a lot really happening on this card front, there's a clear distinction. This is your foreground element and your background elements. And I hope you give this a try on your future card making projects with Altenew. My series encourages you to shop your existing Altenew stash and rekindle their love with newer releases. Perfect Pairings with Jaycee airs on the Altenew channel every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for tuning in to this Perfect Pairing episode with me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hello there. Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.